meeting. So I'm recording now. Welcome everyone to our CHAOSS Diversity and Inclusion Working Group meeting. Today is August 26, 2020.
Hello.
So let's see, last week we were talking about the open demographics and we reached out to Nikki and we got a good response, and I believe we have a meeting next Monday, so on Monday, to have a conversation about the future of open demographics. So that's the outcome from last week's action. Matt, are you also attending that meeting? Yeah.
I don't know.
You
Monday at what time? Oh, then yes, I am.
11 a.m. on Monday, 31st.
Yep. So I can also, you want to tell a little bit about how the discussion went in the issue?
You're always good at summing up.
Okay. So we reached out to Nikki with respect to the Open Demographics repository. So this repository contains a lot of really fantastic information about demographics. And our concern was that the repository wasn't receiving a lot of attention recently. So we were proposing, kind of trying to work through a number of different ways that we could maintain that repository and keep that information updated and available to everybody. So Nikki responded, and we had talked about possibly moving. Do you remember this conversation? We had talked about possibly moving it to the CHAOSS project. And so we kind of followed the approach that came out of this meeting last week, which was to post an issue and kind of give a period of time for comment. And she responded very quickly. And her hope is to keep the repository and all of the work where it's at the moment. And from what I understood, the big motivating reason for that was to keep it kind of independent of a particular project or a particular foundation, and to keep this work kind of situated as to where it is. And so she was very supportive of having some additional maintainers in the repository. And if others have an interest in this as well, absolutely no problem. Georg and I both expressed an interest just because we were part of the issue, right? But if others have an interest as well, please don't hesitate to speak up. And so I think what's ultimately going to come of this is the work will continue to remain in the Open Demographics repository. There will be more maintainers of that repository in an effort to keep it moving. And the meeting on Monday is really just to make sure that as new maintainers, again, this is my understanding, as new maintainers join, it's to make sure that we retain the spirit, the origin and the spirit of what Nikki is trying to build and work on, that there's no real divergence from that. That's my summary.
Excellent. Thank you. Any questions, comments, concerns from anyone else on the call? Thank you for sharing the issue, Justin. And adding it to the minutes. Excellent. So the next, let's see, was there anything else from last week that we needed to follow up on? We were working on the burnout metrics and D&I issues or repository issues. So let's continue with our agenda for today. It looks like D&I badging is next, and then the project burnout metric would be after that. So
we may want to also add, because Shoya is also doing the Google Season of Docs with the D&I badging program.
Excellent. Welcome, Shoya. So who would like to give the D&I badging update. I don't see Matt Snell on. He usually does an excellent job with that.
I think I'm going to talk about it.
Oh, yes, of course, Asta. Of course. It is your project. Go for it.
So we have a launch coming up on September 14th, and we are very excited for that. So I think one of the agenda items over here is need to recruit reviewers. I think that's really necessary for us. So we also added a small PR-based format for reviewers adding their username to a particular file, which randomly assigns reviews the moment it is created. Thanks for making that build. So yes, I think we'll be talking about this more in the upcoming meetings. We haven't worked out the specifics yet.
Have there been any insights, adjustments based on the tests and the pilots that were run in the last weeks? How's that going?
I think it's mostly related to how the information in the list are structured. And we'll be making changes to that. Matt, is the next item put in by you? I don't understand the part about must hit all COC items.
Yeah, so there were a couple things in here that I had put. This was from the reviewer perspective. So I'm gonna ask Justin real fast. Justin, did you sign up as an applicant or a reviewer? I couldn't hear
cannot
you.
hear you, Justin.
You're double
I
muted.
saw you unmuted yourself, but there's no audio coming through.
Oh, I have got a new mic and now I have the hardware,
Yes.
mute. Yeah, I was as a reviewer. I volunteered as a reviewer.
Yeah, so I had talked to Matt Snell about that too, because it's a large volume of emails that show up. I'm not entirely sure how to think through that. So like, for example, if you and I, just so people know, like if Justin and I are both reviewers, I see all of his emails, like his assignment as a reviewer, he sees all of mine as well. And I think there's even some bot traffic that shows up in that email thread. So it's quite a bit to work your way through.
One of the quick fixes for me, at least, is since I think the bot does actually tag you on GitHub, but I don't know if it's at the GitHub organization level or where it happened. But like you're by default, we were all subscribed to watch the repo, which means we're getting everything that comes through. Unwatching and then just getting the bot notifications makes it a lot more manageable, because then you're only getting notified when you're getting tagged. But I figured that out a little late, so I haven't seen any recent traffic. But that was one thing that helped me, was just like by default you're subscribed to everything, but if you unsubscribe from the notifications, it makes it a little more manageable.
Okay. So then just relying on the tagging in the issue essentially, as opposed to, so maybe that's a note for Matt and for Asta. I don't know what your workflow was, if it was to anybody who wanted to be a reviewer, did you automatically make them watch the repo?
Like we just leave it at what GitHub is. Like we assign the reviews to the reviewers, like assign the issues to the reviewers. So I'm not sure that means they by default end up watching the
Okay.
issue. So maybe
Yeah,
that could be
assignees, when you
changed.
assign someone that doesn't attach email notifications or enable email notifications.
So maybe it's just something at the like administrative level to take a second to unwatch people. Would that do the trick?
I'll look into it.
Okay.
Is there anything else on managing the flood of notifications for reviewers? Then,
No.
if we need to recruit reviewers, what has the approach been so far, so that maybe we can come up with some additional ideas here as a group on how we can find more reviewers? So what is the target number of reviewers? How many do we have, and how have we tried to get more?
I don't have a target number in mind. It would be in 2 digits.
Okay, I'll just say 10 plus. How many do we have now?
I don't know. We probably have 3 or 4 would be my guess.
Okay. And I know you've asked on the CHAOSS mailing list for volunteers. Have you gone outside of CHAOSS anywhere yet?
No, and I think the initial requests were like, would you please like be a fake reviewer? You know what I mean? And this is to be kind of a more committed long term. It's like being a associate editor for a journal or something like that. You know, we're asking for a some commitment where you might do a couple reviews for events. So I'm guessing like when Justin signed up, I don't know, maybe you were thinking long term, but I'm guessing you were maybe thinking it was just for this test.
I wasn't really sure. So this actually made me think. I have a story of something that we do in the Fedora project community for testing new things, like changes to the Fedora operating system that might be useful parallel to this work. But we'll do test days where we'll announce on our blog and on social media, like, hey, this day on this month, we're going to have a test day for this new feature in Fedora. And we have documentation about here's what you have to do to get onboarded. Here's what we need you to help with. And it's really clearly spelled out. And that's been a great opportunity to onboard new people because we, build up like an outreach campaign to those things so people know that it's coming up and can plan to be a part of it. It also makes it easier to get help and support from maintainers, because usually there's people, at least in Fedora, will have like the QA team that's all hands on deck for that day, and they're around to help answer questions and help some of the newer folks. So maybe something like that, like a badges test day or test week, whatever would make sense, could be a good way of really like, so you can do some outreach work ahead of time to get it on people's radars and get some hype for it. Do some maybe cross-posting to other communities like open source diversity or other places that might be of interest, and then try to focus the new contributors in that time frame. But just an example of something that's worked well for us in Fedora.
That's really interesting. Thank you, Justin. I didn't know this. I'm gonna try to capture it in the minutes. So if we were to translate this and apply it to the DNI badging project, maybe it doesn't have to be a full day, but maybe even just 2.5 hours of focused getting together, testing with the first 15, 20 minutes explanation, then everyone goes off and plays their role as reviewer or submitter, and then watching the things as they come by. I'm just throwing out ideas.
I mean, Matt and Asta have been, at least for the two pilot runs. So we've done 2 tests, and I think the primary look was just internal to the community, just seeing if it was largely workflow. So I think to your point, Justin, as we're moving live, to be more active in terms of recruiting reviewers who would like to be part of the program. And that would include, I think, it's going to have to include some sort of training. Don't like the phrase, but some sort of committed amount of time where we sit down and we're like, all right, here's what's going on. Here's the badging program. Here's how it works from a workflow perspective. I see you nodding. So.
Okay.
Yeah, so you could have like an hour or 2 dedicated for that.
Asta, yes. Asta, you sounded like you wanted to say something.
Keep trying to do. So
I think the audio has gotten better. Can you try speaking again? I can't hear Asta. Can anyone else hear Asta?
am I audible now?
Yes. Now I can hear you.
Okay, so there's this small change we have made to the pull request template. Like since we shifted to issues in order to do the reviews, so we created the pull request template to like get the reviewers involved. It's by no means a complete version, but mostly what we are thinking is that we can put in resources over here that the reviewer can get familiar with, and then they can become a part of the review process.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for sharing that in the minutes. If anyone else is looking for it, it's in the minutes. Shall we move on to the launch date?
I was just going to say one more quick thing with regard to this. Matt Snell and I have been working on an email that I can send out to targeted people in my network that I know in the diversity inclusion network. So I don't know, we're still working on that language. So I'm not sure like what the plan is after that, if that's a template that can be used by others who have contacts in the network or I'm not sure, but I do know we're working on some language for an email. So there's that.
Excellent.
And I think Justin had mentioned the open source diversity group. I mean, that seems like a very sensible place to reach out to people.
Yeah, 100%.
Yep, and we have a mailing list there and a forum, so we
Very
can
cool.
certainly
Thanks, Justin.
share it there.
So I'll connect with Matt Snell and just figure out, because we had just been going back and forth with the language. So I'll get with him to figure out what the plan was for that or what we're doing with that.
And then maybe could you reach out to Justin too, just because he can help, at least on the open source diversity side.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, 100%.
Cool.
Okay,
all right.
I'm working in the minutes right now.
Okay.
to capture this. Okay, excellent. Onto this block here about launch date.
These are some comments I made, and I just wanted to, if the other people were reviewers, maybe could have a comment. So I'm going to share my screen for a second. So this is, as a reviewer, this is what you see. So these are this is my checklist of things as a reviewer. So the idea is to, when somebody submits an event, it gives me as a reviewer an opportunity to kind of work through a checklist, and we can determine a percentage of things that are met. And then additionally, I can provide comments down below, details like, not only did you not hit any of the code of conduct items, you don't have a code of conduct. So maybe here's, as Georg had done in his sample. So maybe here's some samples on what a code of conduct at an event could be. And so when I was doing this, it made me think about, what we need to hit as a reviewer to essentially say things are good. Because Justin as a reviewer and I as a reviewer might kind of take things on a little bit differently in terms of how we think about, things are good for an event. And so I know that we're all humans and that there's going to be different ways that we see the world, and we can't automate this entire thing, but I was just trying to think through what are the things that we need. So when I say that this first item of must hit all code of conduct items, these are the code of conduct items that I'm talking about as a reviewer. So when I review, I'm looking for these 5 things to kind of pass the code of conduct, this is really what I'm kind of aiming for. From a family friendliness perspective, and this was based on the discussions that I was having with Georg as a sample submission, I was like, in the metric itself, in the family friendliness metric, we have a lot of different things that an event could do to provide family friendliness. And I don't think it's important that an event necessarily hit all of those things, but we may want to make sure they at least hit 2 of those items in the family friendliness metric. Does that sort of make sense?
Yes.
So like, sure, we want availability and findability, but like, I think one,
a lot of it.
What's that?
Okay, I guess I was not audible.
You're audible now.
Yes, so I was just saying that I think while making the checklist, I ended up filtering out a lot of information. So I'll go peek on that.
Well, maybe a question is like, from a family friendliness perspective here, let me stop share for a second and pull up the metric. Okay, so when I see this, I'm naturally drawn towards the metric that we have as a reviewer in CHAOSS. And so if I look at family friendliness, there are a number of different items in this metric that could be evident at an event. So, for example, offering childcare during an event, but it has been brought up, many maybe small events don't really have the ability to offer childcare. It's just not in the cards, which is totally understandable. But then there's other things, like there's events or activities at the event that are aimed at youth, or special sessions or evening events that encourage youth to attend. So there are a variety of different things that an event could do, even a small event, to work towards family friendliness. And my thoughts were that we not only want to say, yeah, there's an expression of being family friendly at the event, but I also want to know what you're doing. So my thought, and people can totally tell me this is not right, is that an event really should try to hit at least 2 of the family friendly items if they're going to be working towards a D&I badge. So not only do they have to express family friendliness on the website, but we want them to express that they have events during the day that are youth friendly. They have events at the evening. They have a mother's room. If they offer childcare, they would express that. What are people's thoughts on this? Or do we simply stop at saying they've expressed that they're family friendly? That's the end of it.
For me, at least, I always, especially with the D&I metrics, I always feel like there needs to be a human touch, and context is always varying.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I get the challenge that it can also be very subjective. So I don't like my default way is that I don't necessarily like saying you have to hit 2 or 3 of these out of X, because maybe they hit ways there's just different contexts, or maybe some of the other things we're looking at. Well, okay, well, maybe all your child-friendly events are like late at night or something. Like, there's just so many other contexts that could come up. But I also recognize the challenge that it's not easy to make that more objective.
What if we even just said 1? I mean, because if somebody's going to claim family friendliness, they should be doing at least 1 of these things.
At least 1.
I mean, we can lower the bar. That's totally fine.
So
I think that's valid, at least.
Okay.
Just to clarify, are we saying you need to have family friendliness, or are we also giving the option of saying, give us a rationale for why your event does not provide it?
No, it's not that. It's the former. So if an event is going to claim family friendliness, it's more than just like a disclaimer on the website that says we're family friendly, full stop. But we need to understand a little bit about how you're actually being family friendly. And to Justin's point, 2 may be too high, but I need to know at least 1, like your events, or there are some youth events on site.
Isn't that what the question's answers are for, where you have to provide rationale for why?
So from a reviewer's perspective, I don't see that. This is all I'm saying right here. From a reviewer's perspective, the event claims to have services and facilities for families.
So if you scroll up to the submission, which I assume you would be filling this out after looking at the submission. So if you go,
yes.
There we do have questions, answers.
Sure. And so
you're asking about adding check marks.
Just a checkbox, just in terms of, from a review perspective, that the event hits at least one item. Do you think that's overkill? Because I think the badge is based on the ability, the counting of these checkboxes.
So it sounds to me like under family friendliness, availability or findability or whatever, there is a sub-check point of saying the answer provided was sufficient. Something along those lines, because I think the information is provided. The question right now is how do we reflect that in the checklist?
Yeah, in the review checklist.
Yeah.
Yep. Because right now the way, at least the way and maybe I'm not reading it right, and we can just work on some of the text. The way I was reading it is there was a claim to be family friendly, and this claim was identifiable. And so maybe we just need to, or maybe I'm not quite right. Maybe instead of claims, the event provides at least one service, something like that. What would you think about that?
I think that would clearly indicate that the reviewer has read the answers and thinks there is the availability. And
there's at least one service. Okay.
So Matt did revert the checklist during the pilot testing. I just posted the results in the chat.
Okay. I'll kind of work through this. So the same was for diversity access tickets. So maybe something else. Oh, go ahead, Aaron. Sorry.
So what do you do in the case like the issue 50 that you were looking at, where the event doesn't have tickets at all?
So in that regard, as a reviewer, the way you had set up your event, it was open to all, and there were no diversity access tickets needed. And I think you had also said, like, we don't have the funds to provide support, like, local arrangement support. So in that regard, as a reviewer, I think I just said, that's fine. You don't need to have diversity access tickets if it's not applicable, and you can still hit the gold badge for your event, even without having diversity access tickets. So the way that Asta and Matt had worked through the requirements for badging, thresholds were lower because in situations like this, it's quite possible that you just don't provide them. Does that answer your question, Georg?
Yes, it does. I'm reading the chat.
Okay.
There's some good comments in the chat about addressing this issue. So it sounds like, to close this up, of a language change to clarify that the reviewer actually sees evidence would be good. And then we already have multiple reviews for each event, which was Justin's question, to reduce the subjectivity as well, because there's at least two people looking at this.
Can I make one last comment?
Yes.
Oh, this one right here. Do you see that one? This is about speaker demographics.
Yes.
You don't, as a submitter, I don't think you provide this information. Do you recall providing that? I asked you later, but you didn't provide it at the beginning. Yeah,
I was surprised by your question. I was like, wait, why are you asking about my selection panel?
Because it's in my review checklist. So I recommend that we remove that. And I think Matt had commented maybe that was totally good, and further suggested removing it because it's not in the metric here. I know this is family friendly, but it's not a question that we ask with respect to speaker demographics. So I just suggested that be removed.
Yes.
Okay. So, okay, I think we'll have to look at other ways to express the checklist items.
All right. With that, we have 10 minutes left. I would like to move forward on Project Burnout next, and we can certainly pick up the badging conversation again next week. Speaking of next week, who would like to
I just
be
thought the same thing.
facilitator next week?
I could facilitate if I had someone co-facilitate with me for the first time.
Certainly. I know, Matt, you were about to give your spiel about being the natural backup.
Yeah, Justin, we're always there to help.
Thank you, Justin. So, Project Burnout. We have a Google Doc for the last 8 minutes of this call. We can go into it. I'll share it in the chat as well. And we started working through it. I'm not entirely sure. It looks like there were some edits between the meetings. Or maybe I just don't remember the state that it was in last week.
There were a lot of edits. So Ruth, who is not on the call right now, she and I had spent time kind of trying to work this down, just because there were a lot of comments. They were all great comments, and we tried to not remove anything. And we just spent time kind of getting rid of duplicate comments, like, I don't know, like Elizabeth would make a comment and Errol would make a comment. And they were kind of the same comment. We would try to bring those together. And so what you see here is kind of probably the most solid working version, at least at this point, of Burnout. So I don't know what you want to do at this point, Georg.
Well, thank you for providing the little history on how it evolved. Thank you very much for the work. What I suggest is that everyone on the call, please head over to the document and start reading it. And as you come across something that doesn't make sense or where you want to add something, let's review it. And we can do this in parallel. So for the next 3-4 minutes, we can just silently work on this. And then as you have questions that need clarification, of course, you can chime in.
And if something was removed that you put in, put it and you want it back in, please put it back in. There was nothing. Welcome all comments.
Yeah. I'm going to post the link again in the Zoom chat. And I'm going to mute myself so that we can have some quiet working time. So thank you everyone for editing the document and adding comments and ideas. I really appreciate that. Ariel, you had shared something in the chat. Do you want to bring this forward and talk about it?
Oh, sure. It's kind of, I think maybe there are some things in it. It's quite a long report, but there might be some things that help with maybe metrics building. It's this one guy called Jan Chipchase, who's an ethnographer and designer, did a sort of long survey about burnout in leadership roles, but it's definitely not open source sort of focused, but it has some really interesting qualitative stuff. And I started to poke them about what they regard as leadership, because I think they're thinking of leadership in a businessy sense, whereas I was coming at it from a community leadership sense. But it's an interesting read, and there's ability to have kind of conversations with the authors.
Awesome, thank you for sharing. Does anyone know the authors? I believe this is Johnny Miller and Jan Chipchase.
Jan Chipchase is kind of like a, what's the best word to say? Kind of like a celebrity in the sort of design research space. So he has a Slack channel. So he is approachable, but he's kind of got this weird kind of elevated status. So, but yeah, I certainly don't have like a conversational relationship with him.
Okay. Well, maybe we can review this and then as someone wants to move forward with ideas from here, we can also reach out to the authors. It's a good idea. Are there any other comments, questions that came up from reviewing the document that anyone
I was going to
like
say, I'm very much in favor of the document that Errol had shared with respect to burnout, of trying to work some of that language in that particular paragraph into the description. We have no reason to redo things in two different places.
Excellent. So we have less than 1 minute. Last call. Any thoughts, questions, concerns?
I want to bring up one thing that went back. I thought it'd be important to note to this group that the OpenStack board is moving to remove all divisive language from our different projects. And I think we might be the first foundation doing so. It's not going to happen quickly, but we are working on it. So we may come back and ask for wording. We have some wording in mind, like allow and deny instead of blacklist, whitelist, stuff like that. But I think we might have more groups reaching out. So it may be a good idea to maybe write a blog article or something on good language. So divisive language is kind of like blacklist, whitelist, master slave. So just getting more updated, unoffensive languaging. And being that Elizabeth's here now, thank you for my email. I really appreciated it.
You're welcome.
I've never thought to do that as a community manager myself.
Yeah, +1.
You know, you send out swag, but an email like that is even better in some ways. So thank you.
You are very welcome. Well deserved.
So Amy, on the divisive language, do you have a checklist that you go by?
This just came up at a board meeting yesterday. I had kind of asked RTC on their IRC channel like months ago if that was something we were going to do. And of course, they came back with all the technical challenges, but that if we needed it, we would get it done. And there are going to be technical challenges. With all the different projects under OSF, each of the technical committee type groups will be in charge of their own. But I took the action item for the diversity and inclusion working group to come up with our stand. And also being kind of the umbrella of going, well, these projects have chosen these languages, you know, you really should use the same terms everyone else is using, that type of deal. So we don't have a time frame because we need to do it in the best way possible, not to break. So we'll have a stand shortly. At least by summit, we will have a stand.
One thing that comes to my mind is if you want to bring that work here, I think there are others interested in working on this as well.
Oh,
and maybe
definitely.
we can.
It.
Yeah, of course.
We do have our, because of Labor Day weekend, we're going to move our September meeting actually till next Monday. So I think we're going to do it on meetpad.opendev.org, which is our Jitsi channel, just so we can be live and in person. But do we have a D&I list for this group?
Yes, we do.
Am I correctly on?
I will look it up right now.
See if I'm on it correctly, because for a while I had trouble with Linux Foundation emails. But after I send the email to all our projects, I'll also send a copy of it inviting this group to join in.
Awesome. So I know we're already 3 minutes over time. Thank you, Amy, for adding that piece of information. I look forward to hearing more next time, but I don't want to keep anyone here longer. So I'm gonna close the meeting and I'll post in the chat real quick the link to our CHAOSS D&I mailing list.
And Amy, if you have any links like that, that would be great in regards to stuff that identifies that divisive language, because like at my work, even occasionally, you know, like me having the language ready to show them why master slave is a bad idea, you know, it's like very useful. So if you have anything that like helps with that, that would be good, because they tend to pay attention to that more than they do, you know,
here is
their brains.
Red Hat. I don't know if we go into wording on there, but just the fact why it's wrong and why we're changing. That's
Awesome.
from Red Hat. AT&T actually, the person who brought this to the board was the AT&T board member, and he actually cut and pasted some wording from Cisco. So
awesome. Cool.
The big companies are doing stuff. They are working on it. They may not be public about it. Like I asked the working group member who is at AT&T if she knew if the information was public, and she said she didn't know if there was any public information. Then when I went to the board mailing list, he said, I borrowed this from Cisco. Well, if he borrowed it already, I can share it out, that type of deal. But that is public, and that is from Red Hat.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, Amy. That'll help me a lot. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Awesome. So the meeting has already officially ended, but you're welcome to stick around and continue the conversation, but this is after the meeting.
Well, you're still recording though.
Fair point. I'll stop now.
And I apologize to everybody. I didn't realize I was.